Good afternoon. Thanks for coming to our program. My name is Christine Gerlach, and I am the Executive Administrative Coordinator here at the Jefferson. It's my pleasure to kick off today's event, and I'm here to do three things: go over some housekeeping notes, tell you about upcoming events, and introduce today's presenter. First, the housekeeping. If you need assistance during the event, please find one of our volunteers or staff members who will be happy to help you. Couple reminders for the Q&A portion. After the presentation, please raise your hand to be called on and wait for the microphone to come to you. We ask that you keep your questions brief and concise and refrain from offering lengthy statements. And here's a couple upcoming events. Monday, February 10th at 7 o'clock here at the JES, Dr. Matthew Becker will present Guarding Your Heart, Good Heart Health, and the latest advances in cardiac care. On Tuesday, back here at the Jefferson at 7, Dr. Rhonda Matthews will be here to present They Not Like Us, Kendrick Lamar, Drake, and the commodification of a rap beef. And lastly, I'd like to introduce you to our presenter, Brandon Wiley, who's originally from Sharon, Pennsylvania, is again a university graduate with a bachelor's degree in psychology and his master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. He earned his licensure as a mental health therapist here in the state of Pennsylvania. Brandon is the founder and CEO of Opened Eyes and also works at the United States Department of Veteran Affairs as the Community Engagement and Partnership Coordinator in Suicide Prevention. Busy and important work. Very good. He founded Open Eyes to address the personal challenges as a biracial man raised by a Black father and white mother. Through Open Eyes, he channeled his struggles into a transformative endeavor, aiming to inspire profound change in others' personal and professional journeys. He and his Opened Eyes team serve as consultants, facilitating what they call culturally conscious conversations. These discussions focus on fostering wellness, resilience, leadership, youth development, and promoting healthier work environments. Let's give him a warm JES welcome.
So much. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Woo! I like that. Let's do that again. How's everybody doing this afternoon? Woo! All right. Look, I feed off a lot of energy from everybody else too, so I need that same energy to keep this thing going. I am so excited to be here with you all today to share a little bit about what it is that I do and what my organization Opened Eyes does here in the community and beyond. We have begun to stretch out into other avenues and other locations like Long Island, New York, and Texas, and Columbus, Ohio, and among other places. So we are trying to broaden the mission and vision of Opened Eyes on that platform. So but Erie's home base. Erie is home base, and so it means a lot to be here, to continue to share to the community, to build a better community. And that's really the essence of what Opened Eyes is about. So I'm excited to share more. First, there's a lot of things going on in the world, and we have, and I've noticed at least, people are a little stressed. Is anybody in here a little stressed out or a little anxiety about certain things? And it could be anything. I got a little stressed myself. I want everybody to pause for a second and just relax. And you're here for a reason. And one of my favorite practices is the practice of being in the here and now. There's nothing before and there's nothing after. We're just in this moment together. So real quickly, if you all can just close your eyes with me for a moment. Relax your shoulders. If you got to roll them a little bit, roll your shoulders. And just breathe normally. And I'm going to do some reflective processing with you all real quickly, and some positive affirmations. Positive affirmations are just really such a powerful tool for us. And we need to remind ourselves of, I don't know what's going on here. Sorry for all the noise. I think we're good. Okay. I think we need to remind ourselves of just who we are as individuals, how we navigate through life, how we navigate through our day. We tend to just be on autopilot. And I think that's a lot of our stressors come from just that, just being on autopilot and forgetting to just breathe or focus on breathing, forgetting to just pay attention to our own personal wellness. And so a lot of my practice is rooted and guided in what I like to call mindfulness-based practice. And keep your eyes closed as we're going through this. And I want you to just repeat after me as I say these positive affirmation statements. I will be kind to myself and others. I will allow myself to hope and to laugh. I will love what I see in the mirror. I will accept love and give love. I will give myself some space to rest and to grow. Now stay with me and just continue to breathe normally. Feel your chest. Put your hand on your chest for a moment too, right now. And just feel that. The inhale, the exhale. You know what that means? That means you're alive. That means you're here. And on 3, I want you to breathe in through your nose, inhale, and I want you to exhale out of your mouth. Big one. Ready? 1, 2, 3, inhale. 1, 2, 3, exhale. Ooh, that felt good. Let's do that one more time. 1, 2, 3, inhale. 1, 2, 3, exhale. Great, great. I love it. Now slowly open your eyes and bring yourself back. Familiarize yourself with the room, where you're at, the space that you're in. Is everybody still awake? Because sometimes that puts me to sleep. I'm standing up here just like this and not coming back. I want you to think about this as we go on our journey today with each other. How often do you just take time for yourself? How often do you just breathe and be in the moment? Despite everything else that's going on, despite everything else that's happening in your life, do you take time for yourself? That's what Opened Eyes is about. And so I really want to share, I'll take you on a journey of the essence of what we do, the practice that we have. And I'm sorry, this keeps on, I think, hitting me. Yeah. I'm like, do I move? Do I move? Do I not move? I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I know that could be quite annoying throughout. Yeah, I don't know if it's touching. I did have it there, and it was still.
Do this part and flex.
Yeah, and it gets all weird. We'll try that.
So
I can't help it. That might have made it worse. And I apologize. I walk around a lot too. I mean, I could stand at the podium. That's just not my style. Yeah, you know what? Let's do a handheld. That's completely fine. That'll work. Because I don't think this is going to cooperate. So this is my team. And this is just a small amount of my people. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah, no problem. There you go. All right. Thank you. All right. Everybody hear me okay now? All right. We're back in business. So this is my team. And you know, Opened Eyes does not move. We do not function without teamwork. And so I have to credit and give a big shout out to my team and all that they do. Shannon Stewart's our co-founder and director of programming. Kathleen Washington's our operations director, and she handles a lot of our assessment-based processes. I'll tell you a little bit more about, again, our process, our flow. Cameron Foster is our director of marketing, and Caesar Westbrook is our media and graphics specialist. Our board, maybe some familiar faces, maybe not. Dr. Adrian Dixon's our president, Dr. Brian Vojkolevich, Dr. Rebecca Willow, Mr. Robert Freeman, and Ms. Elise Michaud are some of our board members, and we're getting ready to expand our board as well. So we'll be welcoming on 2 more members pretty soon here.
I want to tell you a quick little story about why I'm here and why I do what I do and to the capacity that I do it. I'm not originally from Erie, Pennsylvania. I'm from a place called Sharon, PA. Is anybody familiar with Sharon? The Shenango Valley, or the Valley as we call it. I've been in Erie for about 19 years now. I came to school at Gannon University in 2006. And so, but my story about this journey to identity and this journey to opened eyes really began with a moment. And I'm going to share that moment with you all. I went to a school called Our Lady of Fatima in Furl, PA. And it's my accent, Furl. It's Farrell, but I just feel weird saying Farrell. It's Furl, PA. But there was a school named Monsignor Gino J. Monti Elementary School, private school. And I'm in 6th grade at this time that this happened. And I'm walking down the hallway of Our Lady Fatima Elementary School. And this little girl behind me, she says, hey, you, what are you? And I remember thinking to myself and turning around and saying, in my 6th grade brain, what does she mean? What are you? Does she mean who? And I said, did you mean who are you? Like, do you want to know my name? And she said, well, no, what's your name? And I told her, and she was like, but what are you though? And I still had a hard time really grasping what that question really meant. And she said, you look a little different. You don't look like you're just white. And I started to think more too, like, wow, I don't know. I don't know how to answer this question. And so I didn't have an answer for her. And I went home that day feeling very uncomfortable in my own skin, very, very unsure of myself. And I remember I asked my mother, I said, Mom, this little girl asked me what I was, and I have no idea on what she meant. She said that I don't look like I'm just white. And, mothers are motherly. And she said, oh, you're just my Brandy Poo. And I'm 36 years old, and she still calls me her Brandy Poo to this day. And I said, Mom, I know I'm your Brandy Poo, but you're not really answering my question. And I don't know if she was afraid to have the conversation. I don't know if, actually I do know, because we've had this conversation in my adult life. At the time, I think she was just scared. And to put it into context again, my dad is black and my mother is white, Italian, 100% Italian. And come to find out, when I started to recognize and realize that, wait a minute, my parents are different. Wait a minute, my family is different. I started to put together other things, other parallels. Like, oh, wait a minute. Is this why some of my family doesn't talk to my other family? Is this why that, we don't have a broad or expanded family unit? Is it because of my mother's decision to be with my father? And come to find out, in some of the relationships that were lost, that was the case. To this day, I have family that I don't speak to because of my mother's decision. But what did that mean for me? And what does that mean for me moving forward in my life? When that little girl asked me that question, it's like she opened up a floodgate. Opened up a floodgate of others to ask the same question, what are you? And I began to find myself not excited or happy to be asked this question. I began to find myself becoming anxious, becoming depressed at a very young age. The identity crisis. In the psychology world, Erik Erikson's psychosocial stages of development tells us that we go through a period of stage where it's identity versus role confusion. I started to experience that at a very, very, very high level. What else did that cause? That caused suicidal thoughts. I came close to killing myself one time. And I'll never forget that moment. And I was a little bit older, so going through life, cycling through life, hearing all of this, what are you, Brandon? You don't really fit into this. And I spent most of my life trying to fit into spaces so much that I lost myself, trying to be something that I wasn't. And one moment in high school, senior year, I had one of those days where it was just like, you know what, I am fed up with life. And I came home. I remember it like it was yesterday. I came home, I was in the shower, and I said, you know what, today is the day that I end my life. I know where my dad's gun is. I'm going to go. When they go to sleep, I'm going to shoot myself. And that was my thought process. As graphic, as forward as that may be, that was what I made up in my mind. And I came out of the shower, and I remember looking in the mirror and thinking to myself, whoa, where did I just go? Where did I just go just now? It was almost like I was in a trance. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, I can't do this. And the only reason that I didn't was because I thought about my parents and what they would do. And in fact, my parents did not know about that moment until 4 years ago when they heard me speaking on a radio show. And my mother called me crying, like, what, this happened? And my dad, what, we didn't know. Oh, at the time, it wasn't for them to know, in my opinion. I'm not saying that was right. I should have talked about it a little bit more. But that moment really redefined myself. And I had to come to an acceptance of a lot of things at that moment that, you know what? Maybe I'll be miserable for the rest of my life, but I can't do that. And so what happened? I came to college. I started to find myself a little bit more. I started to come into my own. You started to experience other people. You start to experience other cultures. You start to not get so boxed into one thing. You see people from all different types of walks of life. It gave me a little bit of life. Speeding up to my last year of grad school, because I ended up staying through Gannon, through bachelor's and master's degree. And I always say this was my Martin Luther King Jr. moment, because one night I had a dream. And that dream, and I was my last semester of grad school, and I'm studying for my licensure exam. And I had this image, this vision, this dream, and it was about writing this book. And the book was called, What Are You? A Journey to Self-Discovery. I saw it plain as day. And I woke from that dream and thought to myself, now why in the hell would I write a book, for one? And why would I call it that question that I hated hearing the most? Why would I call it the question that really plagued my life? Why would I do that? And so I began to reflect. I began to meditate. I began to process this vision and this dream. And what I discovered was that, wait a minute, this what are you question has put this black cloud over me for all my whole life. Maybe this is my opportunity to reframe its meaning and make it mine. Make it mine. Make it my question. And hence I did. What are you now is the reflection. It is the self-expression to my life and to what I want to share with the rest of the world. And not what are you as in what's necessarily your racial background or this, that, and the third, which is great. We celebrate culture. But what are you as in how do you or what do you see when you look in the mirror? And I'm going to ask you all that today. Ask yourself that question right now. What are you? How do you define yourself? Are you passionate? Are you spiritual? Are you a mother? Are you a father? Are you a brother? Are you a sister? What does that mean for you? Digging deep into our internal self. What are we made of? And once I was able to reframe that meaning, and once I was able to reclaim the power back, I noticed a big shift in my life. And I furthered that idea. When I was having a conversation with a friend, they said, Brandon, maybe you should turn this idea into into a program or something or a business or something. Hence, opened eyes. And I started thinking about that. And I said, what can I do to pour my fears and my anxieties into something else? And I said, the only way for me to do it is by sharing my story and building something, because I began to realize we all go through struggles of identity. We all go through anxieties and stressors in life. It happens to all of us. That does not discriminate the human person. So we created this concept: self-developmental, self-reflective, building ourselves, building our culture, building our community. That's what this opened eyes thing is really about. Creating inclusive environments. What does that mean? We hear that word a lot, inclusion. We hear other words like equity and equality and all these things. Sometimes they're a little bit even oversaturated. And I feel like we even lose the meaning behind what some of those words are. I always preach this. I say, what does it mean to have truly inclusive spaces? To not just talk about sitting at the table together, but actually doing it. Whether you're white, whether you're black, whether you're gay, whether you're straight, whether you're short, whether you're tall, whatever it may be. How do we truly look at the next person and say, you know what, I view you as a human being? And what does that mean for us? So the other question that I want you to reflect on today as we continue this journey together is, what does it mean to be a human being? How do you define humanity? That's what the essence of this is too. That's the essence of opened eyes. And so I want you to think about that. So what I want to do real quickly, if you're sitting next to someone, or if you're not, if you want to scoot next to somebody, I want you all to engage in a little fun activity with me. And I call it just by looking at me. And so what I want you to do is, if you're next to somebody, pair up with that person. If it's 3 people to a little group, great, that's fine too. But find people close to you so you don't have to move too far. But what I want you to do is, I want you to turn to the person that you're sitting close with, or whoever your partner is, and I want you to say, just by looking at me, you would not know A, B, and C. I want you to tell your friend things about you that they would not know about you by looking at you. I'm going to start, and I already know I gave a little bit about me, but I kept a couple things in the tuck that you did not know. Just by looking at me, you would not know that I was actually studying to become a Catholic priest. And that's what brought me to Erie, PA. I always get the looks like, what, Brandon? You're studying to become a Catholic priest? No way, you don't fit that mold. I know, it's crazy. But that's what brought me here. I was at St. Mark's Seminary. I had no intentions of being in Erie, PA. No intentions of going to Gannon University. But if you go to join the seminary here, that's the school that you have to go to. Just by looking at me, you would not know that I have 2 children. I have a 7-year-old son and a 4-month-old baby. And yes, I am tired. She's finally sleeping through the night. So we're 3 days straight. So I'm celebrating that. And another thing you wouldn't know by looking at me is I still go to therapy. And people say, Brandon, you're a mental health therapist. And I say to them, who the hell is going to hear my problems? I got to talk to somebody too. I can't sit up here and preach communication. I can't sit up here and preach vulnerability if I'm not engaging in the acts. I go see my therapist, and I'm not ashamed of that. I need that. I go through cycles of depression. I go through cycles of anxiety. And that's what I tell people too. It's okay. We feel. We're human beings. We express emotions. We have emotions. What are your outlets? How do you practice wellness? We're going to talk about that today. And I'm going to share with you some techniques. So what I want you to do is I want you to just take a couple minutes, turn to your partner, tell them a couple things about you, switch off, and then tell them. And then we'll bring it back in a couple minutes. And maybe if people are feeling a little bold, we can share a couple little things too. Go ahead and take like 2 minutes. Go ahead and connect with your partner. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you all for participating and engaging. So, my next question is, who would like to share? But here's the thing. I want you to tell me what you learned about your partner. Not necessarily what it is about you. Your partner will tell you that. Now, if you volunteer you, remember you're volunteering your partner too. I get a lot of blowback with that. Like, wait a minute, I didn't agree to this. So if you're volunteering your group. So who would like to volunteer and share a little bit what they learned about their friend or their partner? Oh, wonderful. Oh, I'll give her some. Yep. It sounds wonderful. All right. So tell us your name and then tell us your partner's name that you're going to be, or partners that you're going to be sharing with.
Sure. I'm Ellen, and this is Claudia and Brian. And what we learned is commonalities. So she played oboe as a child. I continue to play oboe, and poor Brian didn't know what an oboe was. So we could provide him a little education then, too.
Beautiful. Wonderful. Why don't we share
Okay.
some more?
Well, I'm Claudia, and let's see, Brian is not from Erie originally. He's from St. Louis, and he's only been here for 9 years. And he has two of the best grandchildren. Well, I guess they are the best grandchildren. So, and I have no reason to doubt him. So,
Fantastic. Brian, would you like to share?
Well, I've now been completely revealed, so there's nothing new.
oh wait, well I should say something about Ellen. Ellen is a retired nurse.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Wonderful. Let's give a round of applause for our first volunteers. And here's another fun little fact, too. Ellen trained me on CPR every quarter at the VA. So her being retired, I miss her dearly. So it's so great to see you. Who else? I think we have time for another one. Who else would like to share? Oh, wonderful. We have it up here. All right. So just tell us your name, tell us your partner's name, and a couple things about her that you learned. And then we'll switch off.
Hi, I'm Gwen White, and my partner is Georgiana, and we actually are neighbors. So I already knew that, so that was not something to learn. I did learn that her family dates back to the 1700s here in Erie. So she has long roots and long culture and familiarity with this area. I learned she spent a little time away from Erie, but just for a moment in Okinawa. Yes, so.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Oh. Yes, her son was born. Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, we'll switch off.
Okay, my name's Georgiana, and as you know, this is Gwen, and I know Lotus learned that Gwen is one of 4 children, and her family is scattered. One is in New Orleans, one's in Kentucky, and one is in Cincinnati. Yeah, and so, but she has, very luckily for her, because it's sort of the opposite of me, a very large family, and she's planning her family reunion, one of every year, right? You have a big family reunion down in Lexington, Kentucky area where part of her family is. So that's neat.
Round of applause. Thank you for sharing. And Miss Gwen, I have known Miss Gwen for quite some time too, and I appreciate Miss Gwen very much. So it's great to be here. Thank you all so much for sharing a little bit about yourselves. You know, so real quickly, and you're probably thinking, you know, what's the deeply rooted point of that? Well, as I begin to talk about my business and what Opened Eyes does is, again, it's about connection. And so we go in corporations, we go in businesses, we go in school districts, and people are looking for better ways to enhance and increase connection, cohesion, relationship. If we take a look at all of our organizations or corporations, businesses, whatever you wanna call them, you know, everybody is desiring some type of healthy environment. You know, you probably have heard a thing about toxic work environments and toxic places. Well, that's what we do. We go in and we assess. We say, hey, you know, what's going on here? Let's assess. And there might be some issues of this and of that. There's some discrimination, you know, here and there. What I like to go in and talk with people about is, okay, we can come in and we can talk about all that stuff. And it needs to be discussed. Don't get me wrong. But people tend to want to go DEF and not focus on ABC. And what I mean by that is ABC is the, hey, is there good communication patterns enough to even have those rough, tough conversations? And most of the time, there is an issue. It's communication with self, communication with our peers, communication with leadership, communication with their board of directors. So we find all that and we figure out ways to help and enhance and increase that communication piece, because then we can build off of that. Okay, and that's the core and the culture and values of what Opened Eyes is about. And I'm going to take you on a quick little history about us before I get into some more of our practices and a little bit more discussion. So at Opened Eyes, we lead by the example. We lead by sharing, much of like what we did here today. This is a big part of what we do in our process. It makes the experience fruitful. It makes the experience progressive in the sense of trying to make better of our environments. Empowerment, collaboration, integrity, lifelong learning, impact-driven action. That is a big part of the conversation, right? Because we can sit up here and we can talk about all the things that we do. We can talk about mindfulness, and I can say, oh yeah, I give you all the feel-good stuff, right? Oh, this feels great, and yeah, it sounds great, and I could really Google this if I go home, right? What we got to get down to is being proactive. We got to get down to deliverables, and that is a big part in the essence of what it is that we do. People desire that. People hear things, but they also want to know, how do we actually take this stuff and make it work? And I'm a proactive type of guy. For a long time in my life, I talked about things. I pointed the finger and said, they should be doing that and you should be doing this. And then I took a step back and I said, wait a minute, how dare I point the finger? What am I doing about this problem? What am I doing about this thing? And then I had to ask myself a very uncomfortable question. Am I part of the problem or am I part of the solution? That's impact-driven action. That is necessary in this whole process. Again, we consult with many organizations locally, nationally, and that is always the question. What tools do I need to make this thing happen? We need to provide tools. We need to provide measurables. I'll talk more about that as we flow into this conversation. So you heard the term culturally conscious conversations. That's what we do. This is a developed model that I came up with, my team came up with, and we sat down and we really took a look at our business practice and said, what is it that we do? We have been called, in the past, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've, DE&I. In essence, those principles are rooted in our practice, but I began to realize we're so much more than that. We are wellness. We are personal and professionally trying to make people well. Yes, organizations are contracting us and we're going in and we're trying to figure out how to make their organization or their space healthier and better. But in order to do that, you got to make the people healthier and better. When we work with our student populations and our school districts, we're working with the teachers. We're also working with the students. How to build healthier communication patterns between a teacher and a student. A teacher can't teach if they're burned out. A teacher can't teach if their resources or they don't know their resources. Our students will have a hard time responding to that. We have a Lens program. I'll talk about our programs here in a minute too. We have a program for that. Exploring their impact on creating inclusive and dynamic environments, navigating challenging discussions. As I said before, the problem that I feel like a lot of people have had and have in their spaces, and this is based off of data that we've collected over the past 5 years, people desire, or the struggle is communicating. The struggle is having those hard conversations for a couple different reasons. One, people are just flat out scared to have tough conversations. I don't want to get fired. I don't want to say the wrong thing and be canceled, right? That's a real anxiety. Think about how I feel. I'm up here talking about this stuff all the time. I'm always open for any cancellations and whatnot. And I say that to say I'm not perfect in these spaces. There are things that I do not know. There are groups that I am not a part of. What is the goal? Just because we don't walk in everybody else's shoes, we walk in our own. What can we do to begin to understand? What is that core or that key thing that helps us try to relate to other people in the best way possible? And I'm going to tell you the word. You ready? The word is empathy. How do we bring empathy to our spaces? How do we bring empathy to our relationships? How can we begin to become more empathetic individuals? In my field of psychology, in my profession, it's all about that exploratory process of how can I empathize with someone? How can I create relationships with someone? In therapy, it's a one-on-one session. And I'm talking, and my goal is to build rapport with this stranger, and they have to feel comfortable with me, another stranger, and we have to feel comfortable with each other, much like how everybody came in here today. Some of you I know, some of you I don't know, but the goal here is to build rapport. How do we do that? How can we do that rather swiftly? Well, of course, it takes time. It takes a little bit of practice. But through the practice of active communication, through the process of active listening, we can begin to better understand each other and see each other as human beings and practice those human-based principles. That's what this is all about. And we do that through this idea of mindfulness, techniques to boost the self-awareness. Does anybody in here go work out at the gym or walk or whatever? If you just go to the gym one time, when you leave, are you automatically in shape? That'd be nice, right? If anybody finds a cure for that, tell me too. Do we just one time? Oh, yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Look at my muscles. Yeah, I lost like 30 pounds. No. What do we have to do to see change? It's consistency. The same thing goes with our mental. The same thing goes with the mental practice. And mindfulness-based practice is one of those things that helps us in our mental gymnastics. It's not an overnight process. Building a healthier mind takes time, just like building a healthier body, like building a healthier spirit. In fact, all of those things are connected. In the morning, my routine is I get up at 5:30. I say a quick little prayer for myself. I go to the gym, do my thing. I come back and I drink my coffee and I listen to jazz music. That's my morning routine. I light some incense, maybe a scented candle, set the mood. And I do that. That's my routine. And I've embedded that into my process. And it makes me feel good to the point where if I don't do that, I feel off. That's what this is all about too. The consistency creates good habits. We have to make things habitual for ourselves. We have to make these things, rewiring our thought patterns, rewiring our brain takes time. And I'll talk about that a little bit too. The way you think and the way you feel. There's a reason why you think and feel the same way. It could be learned behaviors. It could be the way you were raised. It could be who raised you, your guardians. It could be a situation that you had, an experience that you had. So I want to share with you, as I had mentioned too, I am a evidence-based, assessment-based type of person. And I believe in the power of measurables. And so over the past 5 years, I wanted to actually put this culturally conscious conversation stuff into practice. And so this comes from a wide range of organizations, corporations that we have worked with both locally, nationally. So it's kind of a compilation of big data. And all right, what is our data showing us with these conversations of mental wellness and mindfulness-based practice? 91% felt conversations positively influenced their perception of culture, inclusion, and mindfulness. 92% felt that they could apply the knowledge. How do we address these things? And I'm going to get into the actual program that we implement. We have a program called Transformational Change. And that is what our corporate clients and our business clients tend to go after. C3, the C3 initiative, Culturally Conscious Conversation, is tailored to facilitate meaningful dialogues that promote understanding, Here's the other process to it. We engage with a whole array of different organizations. How do we begin to understand their culture? Well, we have to give some assessment. We have to do some consultation. We have to understand what room we're going into. We have to also understand, what do people know? What do people not know? We have to lay some type of foundation. We cannot assume things. I will never forget this. My internship at Gateway Corrections Rehab, right when I was doing my practicum and internship. So my first experience dipping into the pool of mental health was through substance abuse use disorders in the legal system. And I sat down with my advisor, and he said to me something that I use to this day. He said, don't come here and just think you're going to use all this book stuff to fix everybody. He said, you got to, obviously it's good to have the knowledge. He's like, but you're going to come here with this population and a lot of populations that you work with. He said, in fact, people that you work with in general. He said, here's what you do to be successful. Here's what you do to build connection. You meet people where they're at. You meet people where they're at. You go to the people in their world. You can't come in and assume and come here all high and mighty and think that you're better than everybody else. That's the issue that we have too, right? That goes back to that connection piece. He said, connect with your brothers and your sisters. Connect with them. They're going to see that empathy. They're going to see that genuineness. Be your authentic self. And that has stuck with me forever. And every space that I go into, every interaction that I have, I want to meet that person or those people where they are at. That's where true connection comes. That's where true collaboration stems from. That's how we continue to move our communities and our organizations forward. That, my friends, is power. And there's power in connection. And that's how we do it. And so our core program that we have developed based off of our data, based off of our conversations, based off of the experiences that are broken down into three pieces. We have transformational change, which is supporting organizations in achieving cultural competency in mental health and wellness. So that's a whole package in itself, and I'll explain that a little bit more. We have our Lens program, which engages in youth discussions about three core areas: perception, communication, and resiliency. How do we build more resilient individuals? How do we ourselves become more resilient? The things that come from left field, how do we handle it? What kind of coping skills do we have to process and deal with the stressors of life? And the leadership series, developing leaders with tools for inclusive leadership. That's a term that I've been using a lot recently, is inclusive leadership. Such a powerful leadership style to truly be inclusive, to truly bring your people together and sit at the table. Be a servant leader. We'll talk about servant leadership here in a little bit as well. So transformational change. Let me break this down real quickly for you on what are the steps and what are the actual program elements. So we put all of our organizations through what we call C3-1 and C3-2. Culturally Conscious Conversation 101, Culturally Conscious Conversation 102. As I said before, we have organizations that come to us and say, we have these issues going on. That's the DEF issues sometimes, as I call it. And I say, well, let's start with ABC. And through the data, we have realized we need some foundational sessions of discussion. And so the recommendation is always, in order to get through everything else, we have to first talk about these two things here. These are core, important processes. Understanding yourself. How can we begin to understand anything else or anybody else if we don't understand ourselves? If we don't understand our own perceptions, if we don't understand our own behaviors, our own thoughts, how can organizations truly thrive if the people are not aware? So we have to start there. And then we get into the C3-2 piece where it begins to, now let's understand, now that we've explored ourselves, now that we've done some deep reflection, let's talk about the organization and my placement in the organization. What is our environment truly like? Let's assess that piece first. Is it a toxic work environment? Is it a pretty good work environment? Is it really nice? And we need to just improve on a couple different areas. This helps map that out. And this is all post-assessment. After this program is done, we do a little collection, we give some recommendations to the group, and then we proceed accordingly. Maybe the organization could benefit from a culture shock conversation, a servant leadership conversation, a mental health and wellness conversation. We're better able to assess the direction that we need to go. And again, this is taking that concept of meeting people where they're at. And in my approach, and the data shows that when we do this process and we connect with individuals on that level, we're better able to have obviously clearer deliverables. We're better to engage with their people, build stronger rapport with their people. Their people tend to feel a little bit more trustworthy to these strangers coming into their spaces. And that's one thing that I've always wanted to do with my organization. I don't want to just come in, collect a check, and then peace out. I've always said, I want to come in, I want to build the relationship. I want to leave you with something to continue the process, to continue the growth. Too often, we live in such a self-serving society that we tend to forget those pieces. We tend to forget, hey, I'm here to provide resources. And that's not just my organization. Just think about us in general. How do we serve other people? In what ways do we serve them? Is it self-serving, or are we really trying to serve and help another person? And what is that like? Do we truly connect with that person? And of course, in my professional opinion, and from the experience and the data that we've collected in evidence base, this has been a great process for us. This has helped us develop strong relationships with our clientele. And then to leave them with something else. Maybe it's not us. Maybe it's not us. Maybe we're not needed for the next phase, and that's okay. Maybe something else is more, prevalent for them. That's what we try to figure out. That's what we discover. And here's our Lens program. When I first started Opened Eyes, the idea of Opened Eyes was more youth-driven and youth-based. And so I wanted to, and that was just because of my experience as an adolescent dealing with identity crisis. And I say, hey, I want to provide the conversation. We just so happen, I don't want to say by accident, we just so happened by accident to get into the corporate world, which has been great. Working with adults. I love working with adults. But the youth development piece is very important. And so we came up with these three things. That idea of perception. How do you perceive yourself? I go to schools. I've been in Fairview. I've been in Wilson. I've been in Meadville. We've been in Philadelphia. Showcasing this Lens program. Gathering feedback on what kids really pay attention to. What they really need. Gathering the data. How they really view themselves in such an ever-changing world. A social media world where they're overstimulated. We're all overstimulated by media. It's taken different shapes. It's taken different ways, and anything can be shared and anything can be believed. And we can maybe feel, crappy about ourselves because we look at other people. Oh, they're doing better than us, or they look better than us, and it's killing my self-esteem. These are the things that we're seeing within our youth population. Suicide rates within our youth is at a high rate right now. Along with our veterans, we're seeing spikes. In Erie County itself, Erie's showing higher than normal levels of suicidality in our youth population, our adult population. I think we are higher than the average of the state, if you didn't know that. Suicidality is really running rampant, and that's because people are hurting. Our kids are hurting. We are hurting. We're trying to make sense of everything, and there's so much pressure. People are struggling financially. People are struggling in their relationships. People who don't feel like they have a support system. These are all identifiers, all risk factors to so many other things. Trauma. We're not addressing our trauma. We're scared. We don't want to be vulnerable. Do you think our kids want to be vulnerable and talk about that stuff? They're struggling. And I can tell you firsthand with this program and what we've been able to go in and do, the stories that I've heard, it's extremely sad. I'll just say that. And I've had kids come up to me after the program because they didn't want to share in the midst. But we have people who will share. Some of these kids will share if they feel empowered to do so. And that's the other thing that I noticed, that sense of empowerment. When you give them a space to talk and to open up, they will. And that's what I love about this program. That's what I love about this, is that it encourages that. It promotes that. And then, of course, what do we do with that? What do we do with that? When a kid, I can't tell you how many times that I've been at a program at a school and I have kids come up to me and said, you know what, I have suicidal thoughts. And I'll give you a quick example. We were in Philadelphia doing our Lens program to 3 different elementary schools over the course of 3 days. 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And I can't tell you how many times that I had to consult with the guidance counselor because a student said, hey, I'm experiencing that. I'm feeling that way. My parents divorced 6 months ago. My mom died from cancer 3 months ago. These are some of the stories that I've heard. Or I tried to kill myself last year and I didn't tell anybody. These are the things that we're hearing from our younger people. These are the things that we're hearing from our adults. We're hurting. We need better practices and we need better connections from a communal standpoint. And we have to start where we are at. And people say, that's a big task to take on. You're right. It is a big task to take on. But we have to slice it. This thing is an onion. It's layered. We have to connect. We have to rally. And so these are ways that we like to have those conversations with our younger people. And this, of course, this idea of resiliency. How can you become more resilient people in such a fast-paced life, social media-driven life where you see so many things? How do we become resilient? How do we develop better coping skills? And so, and the other part of it, I say, is this, in the school setting, our teachers are struggling. Our teachers are having a hard time trying to keep things together because in what we have seen and what the data has shown us is that teachers are wearing so many different hats. They're the mental health therapist. They're the parent. They are the teacher. They are this. They are that. And they're trying to make sense of this all. How do I be everything I need to be for these students? But how can I be what I need to be for myself too to get through it? I can't do my job effectively if I am unable to perform. If I'm burned out, if I'm stressed, if I'm hating myself. So you see the parallels here, especially within our school dynamics. These are the things that we're seeing. And it's not just locally. This is all over. We were just in Long Island, New York in November. And the data that we saw there, that we collected from there, is very synonymous to the data that we've collected here from our teaching professionals. Across the board, there's a lot going on. And so that has showcased it. So teachers are desiring this idea of self-regulation and emotional regulation and trying to practice resilience, to be able to teach better, to be able to be in the moment better with their people and their students and supporting one another. Leadership. I want to showcase this too. A lot of our corporate clients usually take our leadership series. And after we do the transformational change, after we do, that whole process with their team, leaders are like, hey, what can we do to continue to support our staff? What can we do to continue to support our environment? And so after receiving that data and that feedback, both qualitatively and quantitatively, we came up with this idea of, hey, we need to support our leaders in the spaces. The consistency needs to continue and keep on going. So we address it through a couple of different sessions. How can leaders create inclusive spaces? How can they engage with their community more effectively? How can they measure culturally conscious progress? How can we make it more of the inclusive hiring practices? Quality inclusive hiring practices? How do we develop ourselves as better inclusive leaders? And how do we develop a better strategic plan? All of that to say, again, why do we do this? Why is this a thing? We all go through a process from time to time. And this is a concept I call cognitive dissonance, right? We are always in a state of trying to think and feel and make sense of things. And during those processes, we find ourselves sometimes at crossroads with how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about other people, how we just feel in general. And so everything that we do and everything that I've been explaining, we could all relate it back to how people's cognitive dissonance, the belief, the behavior, or the attitude is challenged by new information and then forces a person to hold two conflicting positions simultaneously. So essentially, how you think something should be versus how it is. The side effects can include anxiety, stress, anger, guilt, shame, frustration. We all kind of experience this cognitive dissonance at some point in our lives. And that could be about a number of different things. It could be over a number of different things. It could be about, again, relationship. It could be about your job. It could be about a big decision that you need to make, or something that happened, or a political stance that you have, or a social justice stance that you have. I'm conflicted about this. I'm having some cognitive dissonance, and I need to make sense of it. This leads to biases, right? When we go through life and we don't realize how prevalent biases are into our lives. And when I'm in organizations and I'm talking about better ways to make healthier environments, we have to talk about our own personal biases. And before you go, oh, is this like a DE&I diversity thing? This is just kind of like a human-based thing. Let me ask you all a question. Who possesses biases? We all do, right? There should never be a situation where you go somewhere and says, well, only these people possess that. No, we all possess these things. All of these things can happen at some point of our lives, one way or another. I have biases. You have biases. But let me take you somewhere real quick, and I want you to process this. This is a reflective processing moment. And this is rhetorical. You don't need to answer, but I want you to think. How were you raised? I see some laughing. I see some smiling. Who raised you? What did they teach you? Did they tell you things to believe? Did they show you how you should believe? Did you see things or experience things that created a belief within you that you still hold today, or that you may have held last year? What was that experience that you had that created a bias? Or what was that thing that you had that created a perception that you had of something or someone or a group of people? These are a breakdown of some biases. And that thought and where you all just went now, these all can be a part of your makeup, of why you do the things that you do, or why people are the way they are to you. Explicit bias is more of that consciousness awareness bias. I am fully aware that the Pittsburgh Steelers are the greatest football team ever. Snap, snap, snap. Well, Z-snap that one. Now, here's the other thing. You all laugh. To lighten things up, just because we have biases doesn't mean that they all have to be this heavy, bad thing. And in fact, we all possess certain biases of something. I grew up as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I saw my brother. The first time I became a Steelers fan was because I saw my brother was a Steelers fan, and I wanted to be like him. My dad's a Dallas Cowboy fan, so you know how that can go. He was very upset. But those are just some conscious bias, some awareness that is just not hard. It's playful. It's fun. I have those biases. Implicit bias means unconscious bias. Those biases that we do not know about, but are still there and come out in some way, shape, or form. People often ask, well, which one is worse? If we have to talk about which one is worse. Well, they both obviously compose their threats and can be bad if we're not taking care of what our biases are. Beliefs about others or ideas that are outside of our conscious awareness. I was in a session years ago, and it's just to give an example. There's many examples. And this woman, and I was talking about biases, and I was talking about, did you experience any biases? Or do people bias you, or do you have any biases? And this woman in the back, she raised her hand, and she was a white woman. She raised her hand, and she said, and she was so, I was so happy that she got up and did this, because it was very brave. She said, I have to tell a story. And she began to tell and talk about, I want to tell you about a bias that I have, that I just thought about right now. She said, last year, I was on the phone trying to get something figured out through my internet service or one of those things. And she's like, I was calling some numbers. And she said, and I kept on getting all these foreign people. She said, then I got so pissed off, and this is coming from her. She said, I got so pissed off that she said, I hung up the phone and I said, why are all these damn foreigners taking our jobs? Everybody was just like, oh my gosh. And I was like, continue, please continue. She said, to go further, now every time I go out and I hear somebody with a broken accent, my immediate thought process is, why are all these damn foreigners here in our country? So a 30-second experience from a middle-aged woman created these heavy feelings of biases. It doesn't matter how old you are. Things can be formed. That's why it's very imperative and very important to just be mindful of ourselves, be mindful of our biases, be mindful of our thought processes. Because we don't know who we're going to serve. We don't know how those biases are going to interfere with our relationships. It's not, and again, there's so many different biases, gender biases, or do you think because I dress nice that I have all this money, or I'm stuck up? You know, there's so many different ways to look at it and slice it. And we all experience it in some capacity. Confirmation bias is essentially seeking confirmation or information to confirm our beliefs. So I'm going to seek out the information that really goes hand in hand with my belief system. I might go to a source that I follow that gives statistics or gives information about what I believe. Authority bias, blindly following reliable leadership. We can experience a lot of that. Oh, that's the leader. That's the CEO. That's the this. That's the that. It must be right. That's the pastor. It must be right. That can be dangerous. Affinity bias, tendency or preference for people like ourselves. And this is always a big one in the workplace when we're trying to develop cohesion, right? We're trying to develop connection. They're always, and I always attribute it. I say, hey, we got to check our affinity biases here. Are you clicking up? Are you staying within your own clique? Are you not expanding into those other directions? And I say, why did everybody just come in here and sit next to the person you sat next to, or the group that you sat next to? What is the reasons behind it? Maybe there was no spaces available, or maybe I know them and I feel comfortable with them and I'm sitting next to them because that just makes me feel comfortable. I don't want to conversate with anybody else. That is a tendency of affinity bias. Status quo bias, adhering to the status quo out of fear. Out of fear or of change of progress. A lot of the corporations that I work with, they say they can fall victim to this. And it's not necessarily the status quo is bad. You know, there are situations where the status quo is just what we've done, what our processes are, how we continue to click. This is working for us. If it isn't broke, why fix it? Get it. I understand it. But this could hinder progress. This could hinder creativity. And a lot of people feel that way. Oh, just because this is the status quo, I am unable to be my full self. I am unable to give my full creativity to the craft that I'm involved with. And so I caution people on that. And so to break it down from a psychological perspective, because the psychology behind this is important to discuss too, is, whoop, sorry, I got stuck there. This is the psychology of the pathways to biased behavior. And I kind of already gave you a little bit of that when we were just talking. How does one form a bias? I just told you that story. There's an experience or an observation that occurs. And it could have been how you were raised. It could have been an experience that you had with a person that gave you a perception or a generalization about all people. And I'm going to give you another example. When I was a kid, I was walking out of the grocery store with my father, and two police officers came up to my dad without warning, without anything, took him and threw him up against the cop car. And of course, I had no idea what was going on. Neither did my father. And we had to wait for about 20 minutes. And after 20 minutes, they come back and say, sorry, you fit the description of somebody else that we were looking for. Go ahead. Keep moving. What was my bias at that point in time? And then you see the media. Oh, police officers are beating this person. So my immediate thought was, for the longest time, I had a perception that all police officers were racist. Is that true? No. It was a generalization. It was an experience that I had. And it was reinforced by media and things that I seen. Wasn't true. But that was an embedded generalization because of an experience that I had. I had to reframe my thinking. I had to rewire my thinking. I have friends in law enforcement. I do trainings for our officers. I respect what they do. But a few of the bad apples created a problem for the whole basket. And we tend to do that a lot as well. Oh, we see that person, they all must be like that. Those generalizations hinder us in our relationships, and it creates divide. We see it all too often. We just got through a political season. We see that all too often. We are pitted up against each other constantly as a people. That does not create progress. It creates division. And we will continue to be divided and not make the necessary changes or progressions in our community if we don't get past that. If we don't start looking at each other as human beings, we will be stuck in a vicious cycle. And I know that sounds easier said than done, because it is. That's why this idea and concept of the human experience and the power of human connection should far outweigh anything else. Culture is beautiful. We will celebrate that. But we also have to look at the human person. To what level, to what degree do I respect you? To what degree, to what level do you respect me? And how can we respect each other? How can we fill ourselves with empathy? That's where we need to be. That's where we're at. And so we have to check these biases. We have to check them. Because that bias turns into a behavior. And that behavior can be obvious or it can be subtle. And it can destroy relationships. It can destroy connections. It can destroy work environments. It's imperative for us to always be in a state of self-reflection. And it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. You have an unconscious bias. Again, we all have biases. It doesn't mean you're a terrible person. It doesn't mean you're sexist. It doesn't mean you're racist. You have an unconscious bias. There's a learned behavior in there, and there's some reason that you have it. Doesn't make you a terrible person. But my caution is, reflect on that. What is that, and why do you have it? And how can we rewire that frame of thinking to be better and to develop better relationships? That's what it comes down to. And so here's some think pieces that I want you to have. And we don't have to, and there's not a lot of time to break off into groups. And typically you're getting a piece of some of our program right now that I deliver to companies. And so the goal here for you is to just see the process. So I want you to look at these questions. And I just want you to reflect, and I want you to think about them for your own self for a moment. Have you ever experienced a situation where you felt misjudged or misunderstood? And in fact, we could keep it general. We could keep it open. And if anybody would like to share, would love to hear from you. So we'll focus on this question. Have you ever experienced a situation where you felt misjudged or misunderstood by someone due to an unconscious bias or a blind spot, as we call them? That's another term for it, and that's a blind spot, something you're not seeing. How did it make you feel, and how did you respond? Would anybody like to share? Yes. Thank you so much.
So I'm a white guy,
Hello.
and my job is to help small businesses. And the black community, I've had a very challenging time being trusted enough, not only black, new Americans, blacks, being seen as something other than an old white guy, and being trusted enough to be let into the circle. That's an ongoing frustration. And the way I've attempted to work through that is to develop trusting relationships with leaders in those communities who can say, no, 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 he's an okay guy. Like, he's going to help. But it's an everyday battle, and it's an everyday conversation. And that's incredibly frustrating.
Thank you, Brian, for sharing. Let's give a round of applause for Brian. Thank you so much for sharing. I have the pleasure of working very closely with Brian, and we have these conversations a lot. I already know. I don't care what color you are. I don't care. You care about other people. You invest into other people. That's how it should be. We should care. We should practice empathy. And you, my friend, practice that empathy. And I'm very thankful for you. And you are always welcome in any space that I'm in. I appreciate you for sharing. Anybody else? Have you ever experienced a situation where you felt misjudged or misunderstood? What was that like for you? Anybody else care to share? One thing about me too is I'm a therapist, so I'm comfortable in silence too. People are like, isn't that awkward for you just to kind of sit there and stare at everybody in their soul? I'm like, no, not really. I kind of like it. Yes.
So my name is Brandy, and some of you might have known me in the community, but I think because of the fact that my mother is Caucasian, my father is from another country, from Costa Rica, that I've often flown under the radar, where my whole life it's been very similar as Brandon has experienced. Plus, I'm 51, so there's different generations have different expectations of I'm either too white, not enough white, too Hispanic, not enough Hispanic. Am I allowed to represent this community or that community? And so often misjudged across the board until people realize, just as Brandon has said, that after 30 years of community service and trying to help my community and turning that, growing up in a very, diverse background, low income, extremely low income, Lower East Side, and just trying to empower folks and utilizing that experience to try to understand everybody's background and being comfortable enough to say, I don't understand, help me understand, and doing the same thing you did, as you know, putting myself through college, getting a couple of degrees, and continuing to try to help folks understand that it's all about the human perspective and the people perspective. But again, trying to fit in.
Absolutely. Round of applause for Brandy. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate you. And it's great to work with you in those spaces, and I'm so thankful for you. And for those of you who don't, who are reflecting and want to keep that personal and private, of course I respect that. But remember too that as we navigate through these conversations and try to understand, when we talk about culture and we talk about biases, the walk of life that you come from and that you've experienced, that's your walk of life. We got to think outside of the box when we talk about culture. Culture is a universal concept. There's ageism out there. There's people who discriminate because you're a certain age. You're too old for this. You're too young for that. You're disabled. You can't do that. That's a whole other demographic and population. Or you're a veteran. You have PTSD or traumatic brain injury. You're kind of casted out. We feel sorry for you. All of these different things that make us who we are. Think about that and from your perspective. How do you navigate that? How do you deal with that? And the next question, and I just, again, this is more for just self-reflection. You don't necessarily need to answer. What do you think are some of your own biases based on any factor? How do you plan to address these biases or blind spots in your personal and or professional life? And in fact, let me ask, I'll throw it back. I'll throw this one back out and we'll just process this one. Does anybody have any comment on that question where you've had, and I know this is a tough one because it's kind of being vulnerable, so I understand, but has anybody else had a bias of some sort that they discovered or they had learned or experienced, and how has that impacted your relationships or your thoughts or your perception? Would anybody like to share? Yep, we'll start back there. Then I'll get to you, Ellen.
Now, this one may sound sort of weird, but as a bigger person, as soon as I introduce myself, hi, I'm Valerie Baltzer, and I'm a chair yoga person, and teacher, and I always think that other people are saying, you can't teach yoga. And just because, and it's in my head, but everybody else is judging me based on the way I look. So it's the same difference, just different.
Round of applause. Thank you for sharing so much for that. And again, you're showcasing the vast variety of different biases of what people have, of what we have. And that goes well beyond race, goes well beyond sexuality. It's about how we look. It's about what roles we have. There's a thing called a role bias. I worked as a suicide prevention coordinator, right? If I were to call some individuals up and say, hey, this is Brandon Wiley from Suicide Prevention, sometimes people were like, get the hell off of my phone. Right? I don't want to talk to you. I'm not suicidal. And it might be just me just having to check in, but because of my role, there's already a bias. There's already a thought. I don't want to talk to you because of what you are, or your same thing with the police officers. It didn't matter what you really looked like. If you had a badge, I kind of lumped you into that thing. You gotta be this because of your badge. And again, it's a powerful thing. And we have to check that. And I had to rewire my frame of thinking. And it's important. Yes, Ellen.
So ageism, and maybe sort of the opposite. So I fell into the implicit bias about millennials. But then I started looking at them individually and realized that I couldn't get through the world of technology without that age group helping me through. And so it made me focus on looking for the positive sides of things instead of allowing myself to get caught up in that implied bias.
Round of applause for Ellen. Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate that. I appreciate you all for sharing those things. It's important, the power of sharing, knowing that that you're not alone in this. We all have we all have some type of form of experience in some way, shape, or form. And so I'm not going to put this out to you all. I just want you to think about this because we're running short on time, and I want to make sure I get a little bit of time for Q&A. Can you think of a specific action or mindset shift you've made in your own life to challenge a bias you held in the past? How did that change impact your relationships or your interactions with others? For me, it was connecting and doing ride-alongs with police officers. Right? Years and years ago, I did that just to help my anxiety, because I still had it as an adult, even though I don't want to say I was past it, but even though I was like, okay, I know I can't judge a whole group of individuals. What can I do to familiarize myself? What can I do to be an advocate? What can I do to connect a little bit more? And so I did some ride-alongs, and it was a great experience. And I connected with some of these officers, and it helped that bias. It helped reduce that bias. Think about those things for yourself. The biases that you hold. What could you do, or what have you done to get past that bias? Maybe it was interacting with someone, again, from a different culture. Maybe it was interacting with someone who was a tall person and you were short and it made you feel uncomfortable, or whatever. Those type of things. What are you doing to challenge yourself in the spaces? And this all goes back to this idea of how do we practice mindfulness? How do we begin to have that state of consciousness or awareness of ourselves to be able to navigate through those things? And I'm going to give you a couple tools, a couple things for you to chew on that you could pretty much utilize in your life. So what does mindfulness look like? Well, here's a couple different things of what it could look like. It could look like breathing. It could look like guided imagery. A new thing that I've been trying with my students when we do the student-based, youth-based population is I do guided meditation with them in a room of about 300 of kids. And we do this guided meditation. And I say, you're going to go on a mental vacation. And I want you to find your peaceful place. Obviously, it could be with adults, too. What is your peaceful place? What are your coping skills? What are your tools that you utilize? What are the tools that you put in your toolbox to help you navigate through life? Some other things. How can we practice this a little bit more for ourselves? Being self-aware of feelings and responses. Saying positive affirmations, very much like we did in the beginning. Holding the door open for someone. checking in with someone, deep breathing, as we talked about, listening to music on the way to work, challenging and changing biases when they no longer serve you or serve others. These are just a few things that we could do to help build our toolbox and our ways of dealing and navigating through biases, our biases. Mindfulness-based practice that I do a lot, a thing called grounding. Is anybody familiar with grounding? This is a practice which helps calm the mind. When I'm in the moment, I used to have panic attacks. Has anybody ever had a panic attack before? And for a period of time, it had developed into agoraphobia. And if you don't know what agoraphobia is, it is the phobia of going out in public. So I was getting such bad panic attacks that I didn't want to go out in public. It actually made me nervous. If I didn't have my medication, I couldn't do it. And I'm a social guy. So to feel like I couldn't go out in the midst of others was traumatizing. And so I practiced this thing called grounding, and I had to force myself to go to the grocery store. I had to force myself to go to events again. And I always did this thing, like, what are 5 things I can see? And this would be in the acute moment of a panic. What 5 things can I see? What 4 things can I feel? What 3 things can I hear? What 2 things can I smell? And what's 1 thing that I can taste? And I would kind of go through myself, and I would do this body scan, and it would take my focus off, and it would help reduce this panic. It would help me get my mind rewired again. And that's when I started practicing Buddhist meditation as well. I needed to build my toolbox. I needed to find things that worked for me. And what might work for you was not going to work for me, and for vice versa. What do we do to build our toolbox? And so the benefits of all of this is being present, being actively and mindfully in the moment with others, improving our stress management, retaining the information, boosting our self-esteem. This is all from mindfulness-based practice. And of course, not practicing that, not being in that moment, not being present, makes us easily distracted, makes us feel not heard, makes us feel like we're miscommunicating. So practice your mindfulness-based strategies. Figure out what works for you. And as leaders in this space, this helps us create a better overall leadership style. Not giving orders, but giving recognition, empowering, making decisions, holding people accountable, inspiring action, supporting growth. This is leadership. And when we're in the spaces trying to build other leaders, I don't do this to build followers. I do this to empower people, to be leaders in their spaces. You don't have to be the CEO. You don't have to be the HR director or the HR manager to be a leader in your space. This is how we inspire. This is what it actually looks like. And one of my favorite leadership styles is servant leadership. And what is servant leadership? It's a leadership philosophy in which the main goal of the leader is to serve. And when we talk about leadership to our executives in the spaces, they really, really love this topic a lot because they share power. It puts the needs of the employees first and helps people develop and perform as highly as possible. And they still know they are the leaders. They still know that they need to delegate. They still know that they need to lead. But there's something powerful about serving others because it inverts the norm. Instead of working to serve me or you, it works to serve the people. And that's progressive, and that's powerful, and that creates healthier work dynamics. And to sum everything up that we've been talking about today, I love this graph because we all want equity. We all want to feel like we're a part of something. We all want to feel like we have the opportunity to be engaged in our systems, engaged in our workplace. We want to feel included. We want to celebrate our culture, our values, our beliefs. We want to be nurtured. We want self-efficacy. And all of this enhances this idea of belonging, the connectedness, innovation, having that opportunity and that potential to thrive in the spaces that we're in. And this is just a little statistic. I won't stay on this. This is just talking about leadership, global companies. And I always talk about this with my corporate clients. Inclusive leadership creates better environments. It enhances productivity. It reduces employee turnover. This is just statistical facts when done correctly. When done correctly, because the same inclusive practices that people preach, it can also be detrimental to the spaces, because there's bad people in the DE&I space too that don't just bring people together, but they exclude people. And that's where a lot of that stuff gets its bad name. So we have to be cautious of that. We have to be aware of that. And finally, what's next for Opened Eyes, and what's next for what it is that we want to do to enhance our community and build better relationships? Well, we want to expand our reach globally, which deepens our impact. We already are national. We already are going to different areas and communities and promoting the same dynamic to other spaces. We're growing. We want to enhance our services. The data that we've been collecting has been shown that people want more. They don't want just the group element. They want more personalized one-on-one, deeper community-based connections. Our commitment to culturally conscious conversations and transformational change is evolving, and we need to meet the demand to increase that hands-on support. So we have talked about things like coaching and counseling and one-on-one engagement. So I say all that to say, stay tuned as we continue to embark on this journey together. Thank you for inviting me in the spaces that you're in today to listen and to share what you all have shared with us. It truly means a lot to me. Again, Erie has been my home for the past 19 years. I feel a part of this community. I feel so deeply connected to this community. And I want to do everything I can, even though we want to expand the mission and vision into other areas. Erie is still home, and we still need to build together. So with that being said, thank you for having me, and I appreciate you all so much. So I didn't know if we wanted to do any Q&A.
Do you have time to do a couple?
I sure do.
All right, here we go.
Brandon, this was wonderful. I
Thank
wish
you.
we could take so many of these points and turn them into, bottle them, turn them into a vaccine and inoculate this planet with these ideas. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Love the way you said that. That's awesome.
how do you take so many of these points? One of the points you made is that you need to meet some of these people where they're at. I mean, how do you navigate through all this hatred on social media? I mean, how do you navigate or get into the mindset of these J6 guys like Stuart Rhodes and Enrique Torrio? How do you meet those people and cut through that when they're just so bent on spreading their hate and violence? I mean, I have to hand it to you because I really would like to punch those guys out, and let alone, I don't know how you do it. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for your question and for sharing. That is the $1 million question. How do we completely? Here's the approach that I've always given. I always try to give people at least a chance. I always will put myself in a situation. I don't run away from conflict. I'll engage, but I need to know the boundaries too. When there's disrespect or there's no progress being made in a conversation, I feel like I've mastered the point where it's like, there's nothing I can do with this one. And I hate to say that. But I also, for my own mental health and wellness, I have been told from my therapist that I need to stop with the Messiah effect, thinking that I can save everybody, because I wear my heart on my sleeve, and almost to a fault, because I get really emotionally invested into people. And so I really have to check myself in the spaces, but I will give people chances, and I will sit down with them. And if you disagree with me, I'm not going to run away that you disagree with me. In fact, every time I'm in these spaces and I'm talking to people from all different political beliefs, social beliefs, I say, if you disagree with anything that I'm saying up here, please raise your hand and disagree. And I don't say that to be snarky. I welcome that. If we don't know how to have conflict resolution, even though you might think you might be a Republican, you might be a Democrat, you might be an independent, you might be Christian, you might be Muslim. If we can't still have a respectful conversation, there's something wrong with that. That's what's wrong with our culture and our society today, is we can have these vast beliefs. I'm gonna give you a quick example. I had a friend who was atheist, or he is atheist. him and I would engage in some of the best spiritual conversations I've ever had with any of my religious friends, if I had to just use those terms. And my apologies for saying that. But we just engage in, we had complete, he had no belief system in a higher power. I had a belief system in a higher power. But we found a commonality. And that was, we just wanted the best for other people. And we wanted to be good people. And we wanted to love, and we wanted to create healthier environments. And so we didn't try to change one another necessarily. He gave some points. I received them, and I told him I received them. I gave some points. He said, I received that. And it was never about changing. It was never about any of that. It was just about connecting and showing empathy and love. And we had such a great relationship that we still have today with those same belief systems. If we can get to that point and establish those type of human connections and work towards, and we are all different in some way, shape, or form. But if we really sit down with one another, we will find a lot more commonalities than we think, and a lot more similarities than we think. And that's what we need to build off of. And if people aren't with that, then I will leave the conversation and at least can go home and say that I tried. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? Hey, my mommy's only allowed to call me that. Yes. Yes.
I like to say that I love everybody. Now, some of you I can love from here. And that's the end of my statement.
So one thing that I always say, some people are worth loving from a distance. Some people are just worth loving from a distance. I got family on top of family and friends on top of friends that I've lost along the way. And I don't wish bad or ill will on any of them, but I will love you from a distance. We have gone through different paths in life. And you know what? A thing that we also need to practice is acceptance. Sometimes we need to accept the things that we just need to accept. People will be people. And all we have to worry about is really, if we're, one thing that I learned about having children was my goal is to protect my children. But I also realized that there's going to be one point in time in life where I'm not going to be here. So today, my 7-year-old and even my 4-month-old, I have to begin prepping them for everything else that's to come. That's how I show my love. That's how I protect them. I won't be here to give them advice forever and ever and ever, but I want to leave them with something. I want to implant in them something, a seed that they can take with for the rest of their lives. So just leaving what I can leave behind and hoping for the best that you'll take with it, what you will, and be the best version of yourselves. And if I can model that, I want to model that. And that gives me my peace of mind. And that's just how it is for some situations. Thank you for your statement. Anybody else? If anybody has any further questions for me or you want to get in contact with me, you have this. That's why I put this up here. I love engaging. I love having further conversations. If you had a question that you didn't feel comfortable enough asking in here, shoot me an email. I'll grab coffee with you. I'll call you. We can engage. You want to Zoom? I'll Zoom. Let's do it. I have a busy schedule. I'm not going to lie. And I'm sure you do too. So I will do my best to make the time. But I will engage, and I think I have to do better with that, and I have to take my own advice on those things. And so again, I think that's the thing I want to leave you with too, is like we're always in a constant state of evolution and trying to be the best version of ourselves. And we are not perfect. I am not perfect, and I will never try to be that. But I will try my best to do the best that I can and showcase that in every way possible. Thank you all again. Looking forward to hearing from you sometime soon. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Brandon. We appreciate you. It was so powerful.
Thank you for having me.